It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Throughout the Democratic presidential primary, particularly with Bernie Sanders winning the Michigan primary on Tuesday, a significant theme continues concerning Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. The idea centers on the notion of electability, most media pundits concluding that Clinton has a far better chance of victory in a general election. The failed campaign of highly liberal Democratic nominee George McGovern is often cited as the historical example to support this line of argument. In a Salon piece titled, "Democrats Have Their History Wrong and Are About to Make a Grievous Mistake," our next guest asserts that this comparison is wrong. Instead, author Kathy Donohue points to the candidacy of Eugene McCarthy in 1968 as a more useful analogy to the 2016 Democratic primary race. Joining us now to explain all of that is Kathy Donohue. She is a professor of history and director of the graduate studies at Central Michigan University and the author of Freedom from Want, Modern American Liberalism and the Idea of the Consumer. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kathy, before we dig into our article that we are about to discuss, you're in Michigan. So let me first ask you about the results. Last night, Bernie Sanders finished ahead of Hillary, a highly unexpected result since she was leading in the polls. Explain what happened.
Well, actually, as I'm sure you know, it was an historic moment. It is the largest turnaround in terms of what the polls were saying and what actually happened in the history of primaries. So this was really quite an event. And the fact that he won, of course, makes a big difference because this certainly adds to a narrative. And that, I do think, has been part of the Sanders campaign's problem, that there has been this aura of inevitability around Hillary. And Bernie is now in a position where he might be able to change that story. And if he can change that story, I think he's going to actually do quite well. The map actually changes for him. I'm sorry.
And this point about him not being electable has really permeated. I mean, this is, I think, largely what the African American community is riding on in terms of that Bernie might be good for African Americans, but she's more electable against a Donald Trump. But does this win in Michigan makes Bernie electable?
You know, when you look at the states that she's won a number of states that are southern states. Those states are not going to vote for a Democratic candidate. He is winning the states that have to be won, states like Minnesota, states like Michigan, coming in awfully close in Massachusetts. So he is a candidate who I would argue is actually far more electable. But I'm not the only one arguing that. All one has to do is look at the polls. And I know it's early days, and I know that polls can change a lot, but his favorabilities are a lot higher than hers. In fact, no candidate with her unfavorable levels has ever won the presidency. And at the same time, in the head-to-head matchups, he's beating Republicans, and the only one she beats is Trump, and by very, very little within the margin of error. So this electability argument, I think it's partly due to the superdelegates issue, namely that Hillary and a lot of the media are counting those superdelegates. But as you well know, those superdelegates are going to be free to change their mind, and in fact often do. Witness 2008.
Absolutely. Like even I, looking at the New York Times polling, as well as when you look at the actual delegates and how it's represented in most mainstream media, that we're looking at the superdelegates and the conventional delegates that's going to be at the convention, all looking like she's so ahead, Hillary in this case, that there's no way Bernie Sanders could catch up. Now, why is media representing it like this?
Well, I think that the argument is that the media really wants Hillary to win. Hillary's an establishment candidate, and at the same time, the media is by and large an establishment media. And so I do think that there is a real desire on the part of the establishment media to have her win. But I think it might even be a little bit more than that. And that is certainly the inside the Beltway piece. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I taught in Washington, D.C. And there is this inside the Beltway mentality that makes Washingtonians think there's no way that we are going to get much of America voting for someone as quote unquote radical as Bernie Sanders. And it was in fact that idea that got me writing the piece. That I think that they're reading history wrong. That this idea of Bernie being too radical is actually off target.
That's a great segue into our part two with you. So join me again, please.